proceed?
Sure. Would you care to call the meeting to order?
I think the meeting's called to order, and unless we have citizens petitions, we're on to approval of the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes.
And I actually have concerns about paragraph 6.2 on the second page.
I've got several concerns.
Okay, so Dave, why don't you start with your concern?
Okay. One question is we keep talking about people we are trying to get and can't get. Oh, talk about a nit. The first paragraph under Public Works report. We are using various trade organizations and indeed, the I should be capitalized. Is that a nit or what?
Wait a minute, where are you?
It's the name of a product.
Oh, the last word in the first paragraph.
Second question, we have several calls about various kinds of engineers. How many total people are we short? 2 or 3?
Well, okay, are you referring to the very last paragraph?
On the first page, yes.
That's actually not about the open positions we have, correct, Greg? The last paragraph.
No, this is, I was just reporting that we put out a request for qualifications for on-call engineers. These would be engineering firms.
Well, my question is, how many people are we short? Just for day-to-day operations?
Oh, well, we're short the operations supervisor, a mechanic, and then we have the lab technicians retiring, what, in February? January 20th.
So the answer is 3.
3 as of January 20th, yes.
Thank you. And now under old business, the second paragraph there. The council is looking to, Beard is like 24 on the list, which is below cutoff. And I wrote, so what? Does this mean that they may well not get any money to do anything and they're going to stiff us on this, or do we have an alternative source of money?
Well, I mean, I can report on that we have that under old business again. I can report what's going to be happening, but the council's taking up all the ARPA funds next week.
Okay, wait, can I interrupt? Can we save the discussion
Okay.
for that?
This is to direct the meeting.
I want to focus on the meeting minutes for the moment.
Great, okay.
Okay, do you have any other changes?
No,
Okay, so my concern is in the paragraph 6.2. So I don't entirely understand the email from the attorney, but I believe we should delete the next to the last paragraph, sentence, which says we cannot charge the surcharge until the flow mirror shows how much is actually going out. I don't believe that's correct.
That's correct.
Okay, and I'm concerned about the second sentence. It says we can still surcharge for what does go out, just not what goes in. I guess maybe I would suggest we delete that sentence or edit it somehow.
Yeah, that seemed like a gimme. It's hard to see why it's an argument, but I agree with what you say. Yeah, we shouldn't.
It's also bad grammar.
Charge for what the patrons drink.
What does go out, what does goes out.
Right. Well, is it factually? I mean, that's what I would read the law that way, but I'm not sure. And I'm not sure what the attorney actually was saying. So since this paragraph starts by saying the town attorney says. It reads as if all of this is what the town attorney says, and so I'm concerned that that second sentence isn't accurate.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I agree. I
So should we delete the second sentence?
kind
or-
of think, you know, that considering all the stuff that's going on, having a town attorney sit in on every meeting would be a good idea. I don't know if they would go along with that or not. But we're getting into deep, are we not, John? Are we
Well,
not
I'm
getting?
just saying, I'm sure that they're willing to take their fee for coming to the meeting.
Okay,
So we've agreed to delete the next to the last sentence. What are we doing about
okay.
Well, if you feel it should come out with, let it out. It doesn't. It remains accurate whether you leave it in or out, right? So take it out.
it's, you think, take it out? Okay, and so these are currently posted to the town website. I know you're still learning sort of how this program works for all that. Last meeting, they had a sort of, I don't know what you call it, a watermark or whatever that said not approved.
Okay.
This time they were just posted there. But
Okay.
when I looked a couple of days ago, a few days ago, last meeting's minutes were still up that said not approved. And so I assume, do you substitute them
Yeah, I
after we
have to
approve?
go in, fix the watermark and re-upload,
And
so I'll,
re-upload? And so these then will need to do the same, so the corrected version will be actually uploaded without these sentences. Okay, so given those things, John, do
I
you
will
want?
move to approve the minutes with the amendments as discussed.
Second.
Okay, and all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. They're approved with the amendments as discussed. Okay, so I assume we have no communications and bills. And so we're on to consultant reports. And so Greg, you wanna
Sure. This is, Al Wells from Ty and Bonds, a consulting firm, that we hired to do take a look at our industrial surcharge, thankfully, and in particular, how it relates to, beard and Mystic cheese. So we all got a copy of the report that they put together. And so I think at this point, I'll just have Al kind of go through, briefly summarize what it says, and then open it up to questions.
All right, well, thank you. I'm Al Wells with Ty and Bonds, and I'll just walk through the letter. I think I'm basically just going to reference the tables, so if you've got them at the ready, we can get started, but
Reference the what?
the tables in the letter, so, and I'll try to say page numbers too, but
Thank you.
I was just gonna start right off on, really, I mean, I don't need to go through your existing formula, you all know that, so I'm gonna skip ahead to page 4 and start with review findings. And so,
did you print it out from, Dave, did you print it out from the, yeah, the page numbering's different in
Yes, it is.
the packet,
Mine starts with page 5, which.
right?
But then when you get to the bottoms of the next pages, they're correctly paginated.
right,
Oh,
Yeah,
It's the center,
there we go.
center number.
Okay,
not the
okay.
one-
It's right in the center.
there you go. Mhm. So I think if you just,
Okay.
Page 4 does say review findings.
Yep.
one more, keep going, Dave.
Page 4 you're looking at, okay.
There you go.
There you
So I just skipped ahead, not reviewing the existing formula,
Yeah.
but obviously the issue was, there were a couple of issues raised by the tenant and their consultant about I don't want to put words in their mouth, but it's just about the limits in general. So we looked at those limits, which essentially define what is, and these are your words in the formula, you know, what is above average pollutant concentrations.
Yeah.
So you have 200 and 200 for BOD
Yeah.
and TSS and 400 for COD.
Well, the question that maybe you're gonna cover it.
Mm.
Why are we so much higher than everybody else? Are our expenses higher than,
I don't, I mean, I don't know the history of it. What we did was we just looked at those numbers and you're lower than
Yeah,
most
we're lower.
everyone. I get why you said it the way you did though, but you define a high strength wastewater at a pretty low level. 200, 400, 200. When we surveyed,
in other words, we're claiming that our expenses are higher than Darien and Derby and East Haddam and so forth.
yeah, I'm not sure if it's
We're not
expenses.
claiming-
Yeah,
We're claiming.
but it's just you enact the high strength user charge at a lower threshold.
Do you guys have any light to shine on that? Are our expenses higher? And if so, how come?
Dave, I don't know why you're drawing the conclusion that it has something to do with expenses. I mean, this has to do with the limits that we've said are too high for wastewater, but that doesn't mean that anybody ever said it was because of the expense that was
Well,
different here
and
than
then
anywhere
that-
else.
I think that's a given.
Wait.
Why would we charge more if we don't?
Wait,
Because we could have
wait.
just decided that those were the limits.
Excuse me, can I? Okay, so the formula, the current formula is in the law that was written in 1980, whatever it was.
Mhm.
And so I think that's even essentially the law that set up the treatment facility as the public treatment
Mhm.
facility, right?
Yeah.
So that's when that decision was made. It's a 40-year-old decision.
So am I hearing you say that we've gotten better at things and things cost less? than they used
I'm
to?
not saying anything one way or the other about cost. I'm saying,
I was sort of asking you guys,
I mean,
do you have any reason?
Sure, I mean, I can throw it out. I mean, so there's got to be a cost to it. So where do you start? So most of the sewage comes from residences. So your baseline would ideally be the residents. You know, you have, this is what a resident produces. And an industry then produces like what, 2 times stronger, 3 times stronger. So for standard residential sewage strength should be the baseline, which, I mean, I don't know whether, you know, it's arguable whether it's 200 or 300 or 400, but I mean, that would, to me, seems like the logical baseline to start from. So then you have the sewage is really, I mean, basically there's 2 parts to it. You want to get rid of the solids and you want to resolve the oxygen demand in it. So that would explain the pieces in this formula. So you have normal solids. Okay, solids, the expenses are processing the sludge and hauling it away. And then you have the oxygen demand, which is the process itself, which is, I mean, significantly aerated. So the aeration blowers cost a lot of electricity. I think rule of thumb is about 40 to 60% of the plant's power bill.
Mhm.
So 40 to 60% of our monthly electricity goes to removing oxygen. So there again, I mean, it's a significant number. So by using those oxygen demand and the solids and using a baseline as residential sewage, you can go from there. And I would say there's a fairness in charging more. If you're doubling the residents' sewage strength, then it's only fair not to put that cost back on the rest of the residents. You should pay your share. You're the one that's increasing it.
Mhm.
So, I mean, to me, the formula makes sense and is logical. I mean, so.
As it is.
Well, as it is, yeah, to an extent. I mean, I can agree with either pick BOD or COD because they're both measures of oxygen demand.
They always quote both though.
Well, they do. And I noticed that Hartford uses either or. They don't use both.
Uh-huh.
And there can be some logic in that. If you have an industry that produces more inorganic, I guess that's the right phrase, oxygen demand, if it's a chemical oxygen demand to reduce the demand, then that's a different cost than the biological oxygen demand, which is just aeration.
Would it be fair to say that BOD is more characteristic of residences and COD more characteristic of industries?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And you could have an industry that's like, I would think that the brewery is more BOD, more biological than chemical oxygen demand.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, picking either or based on the business
Yeah.
would be, I think, fair.
Okay.
Okay, do you want to
Yeah,
go back to
So-
summarizing?
and I understand, Dave, because obviously they're linked. If you change the limits, you're essentially changing the cost that you charge and the revenue that you collect. But just looking solely at the limits, you are the lowest that we looked at in Connecticut.
Okay.
Others are higher.
Got that.
So I summarized that at the bottom of, well, really at the top of page 5, looking at what published typical high strength municipal wastewater would be. And that's the 350, 800, 400 for BOD, COD, TSS. And then the minimum value we found in our data set, which is yours, the maximum value, and then the average value. But if you look at the average values, they're coming in around 300, 286 to be exact.
Yeah.
And 567 and 310, but they're kind of in that 300, 600, 300 range. Just looking at the data, trying to separate it from the cost at the moment. So sort of from a, I guess, equitable comparison of the limits, I would agree that yours are on the low side. And that was one of the points that was brought up by that tenant.
Can
But-
I ask a question? I mean, I'm just wondering, and I don't really pretend to know a lot about a lot of the science, but is our locations, fact that we're dumping all this right into a river, a factor in determining how much waste, these sort of limits? I mean.
Well, I
you know,
see
we-
these, these aren't, they're your limits that you use to use a high strength user charge, but
Right.
I think there's sort of a disconnect between that and your actual treatment plant permit limits, if that's what you're,
No, I was just wondering, given the fact that okay.
I'm just trying to understand why.
We're well within what the federal government allows, right, in what we discharge. So we're not getting charged more for dumping crap into the.
Yeah, I don't know the history of it. I would imagine, I don't want to simplify it, but I just wonder if a number was just picked at the time and and they based the user charge on that. I can't speak to it, but.
Well, 40 years is a long time in technology.
But at any rate, that was sort of question number 1 that we were asked, how does that limit compare to others? So it's definitely on the low side. So then what we did was looked at a couple of if you extend that and into the actual formula, what happens if you increase the limit, but essentially that would lower the user charge. So we ran a few scenarios based on the BOD, COD, TSS for this tenant and revising the existing limits from 200, 400, 200 for BOD, COD, TSS to 300, 600, 300. So that is on my page 6, table 2, comparison of various high strength sewer user rates. And the first row would just be the current methodology that the town has. And based on the data that we had for this tenant, the effective user rate would be $1.84 per cubic foot. And just extending that out, the average monthly sewer bill would be that $20,916. Then on the second row, using what was suggested by this tenant's consultant, which was increase your limits. And they also wanted to deduct out the limit from their actual concentration, which I'll get into that, but that was flawed in my opinion. But we just ran with it. I was curious to see what would happen. So if you took their suggestions, you get $1.20 per cubic foot. And the resulting monthly bill would be 13,647. So pretty significant decrease, like 35%, something like that. But to that point, that doesn't make sense when you looked at the formula to deduct out whatever your limit is, at 200, 400, 200. Because you're not double counting. It was a little bit flawed. I think at first I was like, oh, I think I know what they're saying. But then when you look at the formula, this isn't a surcharge. It's a new rate. It's a new user rate for high strength wastewater. So they're not getting hit for the base rate and then hit again for a surcharge. So there is no double counting. So it should be applied to the entirety. Their actual concentration should be used in the formula. There should be no subtraction, in my opinion.
Well, just for historical perspectives, I grew up in Ohio and I worked at a facility at Ohio State University. And it was an experimental sewage plant, but they used both COD and BOD, and this was 50 years ago. So.
Oh, yeah, no, understood. And I wasn't even saying that. I was just, but we're getting to that point.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand you. They were asking that they be charged
Only
for the excess
above the
above
limit.
the limit.
Yes. Mhm.
And you're saying charge the same thing for all
The
the
entirety
use.
of it. Don't subtract it out.
Okay.
It's kind of, well, just
That would
as an
make sense.
exercise, yeah. Mhm.
Right, I think Harry had pointed this out at our last meeting that because the formula calculates a ratio that then
It's a-
multiplies the
Mhm.
rate. It's like you say, it's not a charge in addition to the base charge. It's
Exactly.
the recalculated charge.
Mhm.
And
This is a little off the subject, but not completely, but what are they, approximately what are they paying per month now?
Here,
Yeah,
they're paying just based off water usage.
okay, so, for instance, well, I'm just trying to get an idea of, under your suggestion, they'd be paying about 14,000 a month.
right.
So
Mhm.
how much per month are they paying now? Do you have any
Wow, that's
idea?
a lot.
You take that a look.
And this might have been high. We were using numbers that I don't know what recent data is, but this was a snapshot of data. But I understand what you're asking, like what,
I'm just wondering, I'm personally, I just want to make sure that this would prove to be an incentive for them to change their
Mhm.
ways,
Yeah.
you know? And
You raised the question, John, quite a while ago, that we don't want to drive people out of business. Is there any feeling as to whether this would cause them to leave the
I
town or not?
I don't recall.
So
Okay.
Mystic Cheese was explicit that if they did not get the funding and had to pay the surcharge, they would shut down. When the two guys came and the one, I've forgotten his name from Mystic Cheese, that's what he said explicitly.
Yeah.
I don't have the beard water usage number.
Yeah, to me, $1,500 is coming to my mind for
All
some
right,
reason.
well, that's what yeah, so this is a significant thing, and
Oh, yeah.
it provides an incentive, regardless of which number you use, they're gonna get socked and they've got an incentive to
At my
change.
desk at Water Pollution Control tomorrow morning, I can get access to what the town charges Beard every month for sewer, if you'd like me to email it to you.
Well,
I think it's good enough to have just an estimate.
Okay,
yeah,
So Beard looks like they average about 9,000 cubic feet per month.
and
So that's using some 21 numbers, but 9,000 cubic feet per month.
Do it here. I think I actually have the spreadsheet you gave me. I don't know if this,
the sewage, commercial sewage rate,
0.05.
so if it's 9,000 and the rate is 0.056, that comes out to 504. Okay. Okay, we have a bunch more to cover, so I just want to make sure where everybody's at sort of time-wise.
Yeah.
So one point I'd like to make is I did just create a spreadsheet and do the calculations and got the numbers that you got. And I did that because this 11,000 number for the,
Cubic feet.
11,000, where's that?
that's the cubic footage.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that's the water usage that was used here, right?
By the way, have we subtracted out the amount of water that ends up in the beer?
No, this is just
Oh, okay.
on this is the calculation as the formula is written in our law.
So certainly, my feeling is we certainly should not charge them for the sewage, this patient's drink.
So we have a bunch of issues to talk about, and one is that, and another is, what these limits are, and another is how to proceed forward in terms of these different issues.
Some of those points are,
I guess-
yeah,
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to, so maybe I misunderstood. This is the water usage, not the
correct. I don't think,
strength,
the sewer,
usage.
Yeah.
That's why you need a flow meter.
yes.
No, yeah, no, this is, okay, never mind, go ahead. So this was the estimate, so when we said 9,000 before, this is 11,000, so
Yeah,
it's
and
the same ballpark.
And Harry, I mean, you already sort of had it, but I can email you back the spreadsheet. It's got all the formulas for all of you that they're built in. So you can put in whatever cubic feet you want to see what the resulting bill would be. But I guess my point was out of all of this, this is what would happen if you, sorry, go ahead.
I know what I wanted to say, but you're using the BOD, COD numbers and TSS numbers that were from the early sampling that was done. So what I did was in the either last meeting or the meeting before, you reported the newer sampling numbers that had dropped a lot, although it just says BOD and COD and not TSS. So I just assumed TSS was the same. And so then if, for instance, the 20,000 original charge or 21,000 would drop to 7,000. So the change in the strength apparently following their having made some initial side streaming efforts, that's huge. And actually, the drop in the formula, if you raise those limits, you drop to 14,000 instead of a $20,000 charge. But the drop would be even, so then the drop is not that big. It goes down to about 5,000 with the revised formula. So what that said to me is the side streaming of the waste and the strength of the waste really is a huge issue. It doesn't say we shouldn't change the formula or consider changing the formula, but changing the formula alone, going from the 20 to 14, is an impact, but the reduced strength based on the last measurements, takes it down to.
I guess I'm a little lost about the side streaming thing. Are they now doing it?
So what Beard said was they had sort of several different aspects to the side streaming that they would do. And they had implemented one part of it. Don't ask me to tell you which part of it. I don't understand it well enough to say. But my impression was the remainder of the side streaming would be dependent upon getting the ARPA funding. And the ARPA funding was also what was going to provide the money for measuring or putting in flow meter for the sewage going out.
The minutes imply that we aren't going to get the ARPA funding.
So we need to talk about the ARPA funding, but what we knew at last meeting was the town hadn't made the decision. It had just had its committee had put together a rank ordering. And they were talking about that the top 20 projects, would get funded.
And we're not in that.
Well, Mystic Cheeses,
Beer brewery
the
is not.
beard was a little bit below, was like 24. That didn't say they weren't going to fund it. It just said that was sort of where they were at in the middle of the process. And
Understand.
Greg has an update for us when we get to that agenda.
Oh, okay, good.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
No, this is good. I mean, all of this stuff brings up a lot of thoughts. So we just gave those three different scenarios for comparison, just to see what would happen if the limits were increased. And I can give you the spreadsheet, and it sounds like you've got one too, and you can see what happens with different strengths of wastewater and flow. So then moving ahead to our recommendations, based solely on comparing to what other communities are doing and what high strength wastewater is defined as, I don't think it's unreasonable to increase the limit. But that's in a vacuum. I don't know what that does to your revenue. So clearly you need to consider that. And also you need to be sure that the treatment plant, that raising those limits is okay from a treatment perspective as well. So that was the first recommendation. The second one really is perhaps at some point, not now, thinking about getting away from that formula, just understanding it's kind of complicated. It's probably pretty hard to defend or even explain to users. And some communities have moved away to a simpler format where it's just based on the pound of pollutant over the limit.
Yeah.
And to me, that is a lot more explainable. Like, this is what it costs us to treat BOD, COD, TSS.
But you're saying there is no universal formula that everybody agrees on.
Well, I think you don't even need a formula. You could just come up with a cost per pound, and then it's pretty easy to calculate how many pounds of BOD, COD, TSS they put in. And if it's over whatever your limit is, 200, 400, 200, or 300, 600, 300, they get charged that additional amount by the pound. So it's a different way of looking at it, but maybe it's simpler in the long run.
Well, get down to basics, supposing somebody magically erased all the extra BOD and COD that we're charging them for, would that save the town any money? Save the sewage plant any money?
Well, yes, I mean, so right now, when they're not paying their fair share of COD and BOD removal, if they remove it themselves, then I guess at this point, it wouldn't matter because they're not paying for it, but in the future, they were paying for it. Yes, it would be definite benefit to them to reduce it.
I'm talking about to the sewage plant.
Well,
If we remove the excess that we feel that we've charged them with giving us, if we remove that excess BOD and COD, would that decrease the costs for the sewage plant?
yes.
It would, okay.
So I can say the reason I say that is because the day that started this was a Monday. I came into work and found that the air blowers the previous day, which was a Sunday, ran at 100%, like all day and into the night, and could not meet the oxygen demand of the process. So these blowers normally run at like 30 to 40%, but this blower ran all night at 100%.
This was during a high water crisis.
No, it was not. It was during a high sewage strength crisis. So industries that want to dump stuff do it on the weekend when plants are less manned, and which is not uncommon. So when I found that out, that's when we started tracking down and looking to see who was dumping something. And it led to the discovery of the brewery. Now, I'm not saying they dumped, but that's, the guys that said, oh yeah, we can smell beer at the pump stations. So we tracked it back, and I drove down the road and there was a brewery. So yeah, it would say that would save money if those blowers didn't run all night at 100%. They're like I say, they're one of the highest energy expenses of the plant is the blowers.
Okay.
It's actually, I mean, I'll jump around a little bit, but that was our last recommendation in the letter really was to do just what you're saying, is to try to not have or high strength
Oh, yeah.
waste in the collection system. I mean, you can generate revenue from it, but it also takes a toll. It's a lot of wear and tear. And I think we just think of the treatment plant, but it's, you know, if it's a ton of solids, now you're clogging up sewers, pumps are getting bound up, wet wells are getting full, it's more maintenance, pumps break. If it's a lot of oxygen demand, things go septic, you get corrosion in the collection system. So it may not be worth it. Do you know what I mean? Even though you're getting a high strength user fee, it may not even fully reflect the cost long-term to you. But that was our last recommendation. But I think side streaming is an excellent idea, and anything they can do to decrease their waste and maybe financially incentivizing them in terms of having a high user charge is good, because it gets them to lower their waste if they can, their strength of their waste. But that was the last recommendation. But in terms of the formula, the other recommendation was to consider either using, and we mentioned this earlier, either BOD or COD. And you could have flexibility. You could look at which one is exceeding your limit by the most and just use that one, because I think as a practical matter, it would be hard to know. It's the same process. It's the aeration process that's really helping supply the oxygen that's being demanded to treat the water. And whether it's a chemical oxygen demand or a biological oxygen demand, the cost of your oxygen, I think it's going to be the same. So I think you just pick the most offending concentration, the one that's most above the limit, and base the fee on that. And maybe just it's still going to be the same basic formula. Do you know what I mean? The ratios just need to be corrected, but just pick one. And here we recommended BOD because it's what your process is based on. But again, if you're monitoring COD and you see, well, wait a minute, this is the one that's really high, then just have the option to flip it out and use COD. Then specific to the tenant or to the property where the tenant is, it's our understanding that there is no sewer meter, that the only means you have to create a bill is water consumption, which, to me, that seems like the most obvious thing to do is to get a sewer meter in there, because clearly, even not considering the bill for the moment that was passed by the House of Representatives, it's the high strength sewer volume that would be the fair thing to base the bill on and reflect what the true cost is to the treatment plant. In all likelihood, I would guess they're using more water than discharging down the sewer. So if it was based on sewer flow, that would likely, I think, decrease
What
the
else
sewer
would they
bill.
be doing with the water?
Well, a lot of it's
Making beer out of it.
going into the
Making
beer. Mhm.
So the estimate they gave us was that 25% of the water
Mhm.
went out as beer.
Gotcha.
So, and that 75%.
But that's not the case with the cheese place, and they're producing.
Right, but the law doesn't apply to anything except beer brewery.
Well, okay, but
The excess high strength sewage issue, yes, applies to both.
Mhm. So the thought there, and it sounds like there might, and I don't know how this works. I guess that would be for the lawyers to figure out, but it seems like there is some sort of obligation, right, to charge it based on actual sewer flow and not water consumption in the case of the brewery, at least. So that's clearly a recommendation, not just because of the bill, but also.
who are you
because of the
recommending
logic.
should pay for it?
That's the good question. I don't know. And this bill seems to be silent to it, right? But I would think they would be incentivized, right? I mean, if it's going to lower their bill.
Unless they can argue that we can't charge them
Mhm,
unless we know how much they're using.
mhm.
I mean, under that law, so I
Yeah, I mean,
think
I guess I
really
don't,
written.
are there any other sewer meters in town that you use to base it?
There's industrial users that have flow meters.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I've looked at that. There's, the town has a brewery. It's that one that sort of dived down a little bit in the middle of Mystic. That's town,
Well,
I'm sorry, that's city, not town.
no, well, no, that is town. They produce beer and sell it in their site.
Well, they're using beer.
No,
No,
they,
no.
There's two breweries in downtown Mystic,
Yeah,
but they don't produce anywhere near as much beer as Beard does.
Mhm.
yeah, and in any case, they're Groton City, aren't they? Not
no,
Groton
they're
Town.
in Mystic. Mystic is all Groton town.
I think he's
Yeah,
talking
there
about
is- there is
the outer
one in the
limits,
city.
outer
Right.
lights or whatever it's
What
called,
is-
Yeah,
There,
over on Bridge Street.
yes,
Mystic is all Groton Town.
yes. Groton City is over here where Pfizer and Electric Boat are, and there is one brewery, what's it called?
Outer Limits or
Outer
Outer lights, outer lights.
Outer Lights,
Outer Limits is a deli.
which is up sort of the northern,
So
Yeah.
so they pay us too.
no, they're the
Oh.
city.
City has their own
Oh, they're
plan.
city, okay.
Okay, so are there any further questions specifically on the report? I thought the report was very well written, covered the topics and issues that I thought we had raised and had questions about.
Yeah,
And
good
so
job.
I found it very helpful and a good, yes, a good job.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So I want to make sure whether there's any, do you guys have any questions in
No,
regard to the
I-
report? I think we have a bunch of issues around follow-up and I want to get to that in a minute. But first I want to make sure everyone is clear about what's in the report.
I have an editorial comment.
Mhm.
Would you make the subscripts a little bigger?
Yes.
I have to squint.
Okay, anything further on the report itself? It sounds like no, so thank you very much. I
Yes,
think
indeed.
we all, it seems like everybody appreciated it. So, I guess I'm a little unclear how we raise the agenda, what I see as being agenda items for follow-up of the report. Can we wrap that into the old business and the update, or should we talk about that now, or should we?
I would talk about it now.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I guess the issues that I heard were how, there's well, if we just look at the recommendations, there's a recommendation to consider changing the limits from the 200, 400, 200 to 300, 600, 300. And so do we want to support that or not? And then there's this thing, the changing to the pounds. And I have to say, I don't quite follow how that would work, but I guess,
I mean, you're saying a pint isn't a pound the world round.
Anyway, the recommendation is that the surcharge could simply be based on the pound limit. I think the issue of the sewer meter and so forth, we need to deal with as part of the Beard update, because that is already in the ARPA funding
Well,
proposal.
this big thing by the House of Representatives says specifically, we can't charge for the water that's in the beer.
So I read it that way too, but that's not the way I read the attorney report.
Oh, really? So you think the attorney knows something the legislature doesn't know?
No, he seems to have, and then it's not clear to me what these emails are actually saying. I mean,
I didn't know, I mean, it doesn't say much in that bill, on that topic. But what it does say, and I don't know if this would be for the lawyer, was, I mean, I'll just read what it shall not consider, as we know, the volume of water consumed by the holders of manufacturer permits for beer
Yeah,
in establishing or revising charges to such holders. So that's the part I'm wondering, is there like a grandfather thing? I'm almost, do you know, like, if you don't change anything for the time being, maybe the current system still works, but the second you go to revise it, does that trigger? That would be my one question for a lawyer. Is that in essence a grandfather clause? Does that only apply to any future changes in your billing? You've already got
Yeah,
those
and I
rates
don't know
established,
on
yeah.
that. And, you know, but I didn't understand the email from Greg Hanover. Sorry,
To me.
to Greg, from Eric Callahan. As the town
Actually, that's an
attorney.
interesting interpretation. Because I could see, because it says in establishing or revising.
Mhm.
So if you've already got the charge, you have already established it.
Yeah, because I think this bill would wreak havoc for every municipality. I mean, I'm sure you're not alone. And is everyone going to now change how this would change your budget, right? It would change how you collect revenue. So to me, I would think, like
Well,
any new law,
My guess is that the intent, because some lobbyists got that in there.
mhm,
The intent was to make sure that you couldn't charge at all. That
right?
you couldn't have a fee that did what this says you can't do. But the language that they use is such that it really is ambiguous.
Mm,
well, just as a matter of common sense, it seems to me, yeah, of course. Why should you charge for stuff that you sell to the public, which doesn't go into the sewage system? Well, it goes into the sewage system of some customer. But would it be appropriate to make a motion that we do not consider the portion of the water that goes into the product at this point? Would that simplify anything?
How do
Then
we,
we're just talking about BOD and COD.
how do we determine how much water is going into the product?
Oh,
They won't-
so take the amount of water they use and subtract the amount of beer they sell.
They're not gonna tell you that, for one thing. They're not.
They will if it's a matter of you know, what they have to pay.
Well,
Sure,
they,
they can tell us.
but if we make the rule that we can't charge for then it's up to us to figure it out. I mean, they don't have to do anything.
Well, so when I read Eric Callahan's email, he quotes a bunch of things that say that I'm trying to find it here.
It was that email.
It's at the very end of the agenda packet for this meeting.
Oh.
And I can't find it this minute, but you know, there were things highlighted that essentially read as the charges could be estimated.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, they're gonna have to at some point.
oh, here it is. So the town of Groton ordinance.
What page we've been looking at.
So you're at the very end of the agenda packet. Yeah, so keep going, Dave. It's after that. Keep going. It's difficult to read because it's highlight there, right there, I think, on
Yeah.
at the very bottom of that.
Look at this page here.
Yeah.
Some green things.
Yeah, and so
I think that estimate he's talking about is for the water meter, not the sewage.
What do, well,
that's the water meter. Okay, thank you.
The second part B clearly states they need to put in a sewer meter or we charge for the full amount.
Right. And so it just wasn't clear to me. I mean, the question that that was posed was, does this new law supersede the town of Groton ordinance that established the high stream sewer charge? And it's not clear to me what the answer from this is.
But the actually, the legislature doesn't necessarily bind the town.
I am not gonna try to answer because I am not the lawyer.
Right. Right.
Oh, it sounds like we need to ask our lawyer.
Well, we did ask the lawyer and I don't know what his answer is saying. He says, Eric, I do not think the PA, which is, I assume, the law, the Public Act, supersedes the part of the ordinance Craig is talking about, at least in this sense.
Oh,
That's the first sentence of his response, and I don't really follow what comes after that. So I guess my other question is, even if we wanted to change, well, one question I have is whether you guys think there would be any improvement of switching to this pounds rather than the current formula. But the other question I have is, it seems like to change the formula, we then have to get the town to enact a new
It's a whole ordinance change. which is-
ordinance, right?
Public hearing, the council, the RTM. So it's a process. It takes several months,
yeah.
not long.
Well, the town, if we change the limits, the town is gonna, or do we do that ourselves?
No, it's in the ordinance. The ordinance has to be changed by the town.
Yeah, you guys would have to vote on it. I would.
And we'll have to do that anyway, if we change the, number, the BOD, COD, whatever.
To
yeah.
change the limit numbers or to change to
Change
this
anything.
pounds.
So it's just another thing that goes in the hopper of changing the ordinance.
By having the gallons and the concentration in milligrams per liter, you basically have the pounds there. So it's not like they have to do anything different. It's just a different way the formula is calculated.
By how much is a pound different from a pint?
Oh, I can't do the math in my head. What's a pint? then?
A liter is 2.2 pounds.
Well, what they told me in elementary school was a pint is a pound the world around, so I assume it's.
Yeah, maybe.
Close, yeah.
So a gallon is 8.34 pounds. So a pint would be 1/8 of that, which would be 1.03.
There you go.
Okay, so a pint is a pound approximately.
Approximately, yeah, okay.
Never heard that. I like that.
Okay. So
My thought there with that recommendation was just, so you didn't have to deal with the formula anymore. I mean, I know you're still dealing with numbers, but,
Different for action, huh?
but I guess the formula works, you know how to use it.
I guess the hard part for me would be coming up with $1 per pound. I don't know if that's something that's easy to figure out or.
I mean, you're that formula is sort of loosely based on your total cost of the, I know that's probably your total budget divided by your volume. But I hear your point. You'd have to look at your cost at the treatment plant for the processes that are more associated with BOD versus TSS and sort of apportion it that way. I guess no matter what you do, you're always coming up with a ratio, but once you came up with it, it would be basically fixed. If someone's over by this many pounds, hey, that's what you're charging per pound. There's no magical, I shouldn't call it magical. There's no formula to contend with for the end user. They just like, okay, well, that's my cost per pound. Nothing to really debate, I suppose, but.
Looking through this email, it seems like the statutes and the ordinances create an unbelievable amount of ambiguity.
This business
Like a
about
house bill.
not charging.
Not just
for
a
what
house
they
bill, but
kids drink.
Our
Our
ordinance say basically that if you feel as a commercial property
House
that
of
you're
Representatives.
putting out less water than you're
And that
using,
So
that
clearly,
you
this
should
was a
install a
law
meter.
that was really
All of those
addressing
things that
something
predates
else.
The
And
statute
the
itself.
lobbyists stuck that
Okay, so the question
thing
is, does
about
the
So
statute
the answer to my
breweries
question is yes,
explicitly
the only
repeal
reason
that
for the whole thing
requirement?
is that.
Or does it keep
Yeah,
it in place, in
one
which
thing about
case
it.
we.
well, no, the
still-
law is about
What this
something
says is
else.
if,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
It
they
was
don't-
for a different
if they don't
purpose.
install
We don't
plumbing,
have to worry about it.
then
We didn't
we
have to worry
estimate
about
what
the
they're
rest of the law.
so we could still just estimate,
One,
you know, unless they put a flow meter.
And that'd be a great argument for not changing the ordinance, right? If that's,
Well, yeah, you,
if you're grandfathered in.
right. And you would argue that, okay, until you do a flow meter, we're gonna assume that 20, did they say anything in their letter about what percentage they think goes out as opposed to coming in?
Here,
Yeah,
they've told us that verbally at the meeting, I think it's what, 25 or 30%.
Yes, verbally at the meeting when he was here.
25% is retained, so 75% goes out.
so, you know, if you use their figure, it'd be a tough time for them to complain, although I don't believe it. To be honest
Yeah,
with you,
it seems like all. I don't know.
but, yeah, it's sort of wonder who wrote that statute.
Okay, so do we want to do nothing? Or, so I'm personally comfortable with the idea that we would change the limits to 300, 600, 300. I still don't understand this pounds thing because I think all you know is, somebody has to measure sewage and what's in it. And so that automatically becomes about the water flow and the sewage in it. But so I'm inclined to stick with sort of the current thing, I guess. And originally I had thought the idea of having both BOD and COD was somewhat duplicative, but the way the formula worked, duplicative, but the way the formula works, it assigns 1/5 to BOD and 1/5 to COD. And given what Harry said earlier about, BOD for sort of would be more typical for households and maybe like for the brewery, but COD could be more typical for industries of different, they're doing different things in their, maybe it does make sense to have both of them, and you're not sort of double counting in the sense that you've assigned each of them, only 1/5 of the computation.
Yeah,
So I guess the other thing I wanted to understand was, and I've probably asked this before, but I keep forgetting the answer if I have. Do these businesses that you say have meters and, are being regulated under a different regulatory structure, but are they being charged the high strength? And so I guess one issue is I would want to understand sort of how much revenue is coming in from the high strength charges and what would be the impact of changing those limits. So maybe that would be the thing that could you all evaluate that and tell us at the next meeting? So essentially, if nothing changed, then obviously we won't have the number. Well, it'd be for the businesses that are currently paying the high strength.
I hate to throw a monkey wrench into all this, but I'm looking at the statute again. And I'm wondering whether or not, okay, one argument we have at the moment is that we're not establishing or revising charges. because we're just using the charges we've always had. If we change the manner in which we determine, like, we go to your suggestions, then we're revising our methodology. So, we should consider
I
that.
agree. I think that's a legitimate concern. And so I think we have to pursue multiple I would suggest we pursue multiple tracks.
Mm.
One is to ask the town attorney if they are willing to stand up for the interpretation you just spoke to. In other words, if somebody were to take the town to court,
Right.
that they're prepared to support that interpretation.
Yeah.
If they are, fine. If they're not, that's a different
I mean,
story.
it just seems to me that we should be. You should be able to interpret the statute at the very least to be able to say, okay, fine, we can't charge you for the water going in, but lacking but since you lack a meter, you're gonna have, we can estimate. And, I mean, there has to be a way to, I mean, otherwise they get away with murder. They can dump as much as they want in there and you can't charge them anything extra.
Why are they so hard over about a meter? I mean, a meter is a piece of machinery. Why don't they just put it in?
It was about, their request to ARPA was about $50,000.
For a meter?
Well, a big portion of that was the meter and I don't know,
They had to put a whole manhole structure.
manhole structure, right?
It's probably not the meter that's very expensive, to your point, but just the excavation, manhole, pipe work, site work, driveway, wherever it is.
So they're willing to do it, that just for the moment, they're not willing to pay for it themselves.
Yeah, the negotiating point, I guess.
But again, if we use Harry's number with our current formula, their charges go down from 20,000 that you calculated using the original monitoring information. I recalculated using the newer monitoring information, and their charge goes down to I forgot what I said, to 14,000 from the 21,000. So the side streaming that they've done already, assuming those numbers are representative, has cut it by a third.
$5,000. We're arguing about $5,000 a month, 60,000 a year. Well, that's worth arguing about. What do they do with, tell me about the side screening. What do they do with all this other stuff?
It's in their report that they gave us last meeting. They're collecting some stuff and trucking it off to somewheres. That's some
Okay.
farm or something. I've forgotten what.
I say, okay.
Okay, so again, I guess my thought would be, I would still like to know what the impacts on our revenue would be if we were to adjust the formula. Do you have any idea what fraction of our budget is
No, I think
sort
we're
of
gonna have
paid
to.
for by the high strength? Okay, so I think we need to understand that. And we need to know what whether the lawyer would support the position that, if we don't change our formula, that I don't know how to word it.
Yeah.
Because
Well, the town council is ultimately gonna have to approve whatever we propose.
if we propose a change,
If we propose a change, yeah. So is there any, has anybody done any research with the town council? Are they gonna say, we want to keep
no,
costs down?
we haven't started trying to figure all those things out.
Yeah,
Okay, so I guess another thing would be, I have no idea how the process works to revise the ordinance, and sort of related to that, making revision. And if we wanted to propose that the formula be changed, probably it is easiest if we just make that change, but would it make sense to revise the whole darn ordinance, at least get rid of the stuff that mandates asbestos cement and lead connections and
That
stuff?
thought had occurred to me too.
Because if
The
we're,
whole thing and revise.
yeah,
Somebody obviously took the time to do that in 1985, because it was originally written in 69 and 85 was the last revision. So it's
oh,
been
okay.
In years
25,
past,
35
when we
years.
had this discussion, it usually started with what ARPA did, or what the federal government did, and what that caused the state government to impose in the way of requirements on various pollutants. Have they sort of backed off? They don't do that anymore?
Federal government?
What is that?
Has the federal government backed off the pollutants?
The federal government and the state government, as I say, it
No.
used to be that the feds booted the state and the state booted us. Are they still doing that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, it's 6:43 and we still need to go through a bunch of agenda items. I don't know if people have unlimited time here.
Good.
Well, I should suggest that maybe we do ask that a town attorney attend the next meeting so that we
Yeah,
can
that's- yeah. So
ask some questions and try to get this thing.
so we'll do an evaluation for how it impacts other type strength users and but kind of the next meeting.
That's fine. I'm happy to invite the town attorney. I think the more that we can specify what the questions are that we're gonna raise, the more helpful it would be, because I'm sorry, but y'all attorneys, I would prefer you thought about things rather than give us off the cuff.
Right, I understand, but it seems to me the thing to do is to sort of raise the questions so that they understand what the issues are in our heads. They don't have to give us an opinion that day. They can go back to their office and then they can do some work and look into it and make suggestions. I mean, a lot of this really is sort of long-term. It's not just about beard anymore. It's really about how we charge any of these folks.
Well, any of these folks being the 5 breweries in town, or
Well.
if we revise the formula, that impacts all the high strength.
Commercial.
Do we have any idea how many high strength users there are?
Couple of metal finishers.
So it's just a couple,
Yeah,
it's
there's
not
not.
dozens.
No.
Okay, okay.
How come none of them are complaining?
I understand it's a cost of business.
Yeah.
Okay,
I guess if we ever add another brewer, then probably require them to have a flow meter. Part of their, I don't know if they have to have a license or whatever, but
okay, so
You are allowed to require that, aren't you?
I don't know. I have
not
no
sure.
idea who.
that's one of the questions we can ask.
I mean,
Have the town attorney look
my
into it.
reading of the law, our ordinance for the sewer, my reading was that it says that the director of public works can require them to put in a meter.
That's what it says. You know, maybe if we do have the town attorney here, maybe what people could do is just sort of, we could submit questions in advance that at least they would know what's on our minds. And they could prepare a little bit. It doesn't mean that they would have the definite answers for us at that meeting, but it would give everybody an opportunity to sort of set the stage, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, no matter what you do to the formula to charge them, you still need the sampling and the monitoring.
Right.
I mean, one question, I think that, one basic question is, can we force them to put in a flow meter? I mean, it's, can we require that so that they just have to do it? I mean, it seems like it says that we can, but has this statute changed that? I don't know.
Well, the ordinance says should install, it doesn't, it's not a shall.
Is it possible to participate in it? Is it possible to, share the costs? I'm racking my brain to find a way forward.
Well, so the ARPA funding would
Yeah.
provide the funding,
Right.
so that would be the town essentially
Right.
sharing or providing them the funds to install that meter.
But I guess, when it looked
So
like
let's
they were
go
gonna,
on. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Laura.
when it
I
looked
just
like
wondered,
they
does
were,
anybody know how long it's gonna take ARPA to make up their mind?
Greg will
as I
give
was
us,
saying,
Okay,
when it looked like ARPA funds were gonna be available to them, that was one situation, but now that we're understanding that that may not be an option for them, that's, that's a big nut for a small business.
yes, so let's go on. Honestly, and maybe do the Public Works Director's report, a quick facility report, and then we have old business, which is beer and Mystic Cheese. And somewhere's in there, Greg is gonna give us an update on what's up with the ARPA funding. So, is that good? I guess you're welcome to stay or leave as your time and interest.
I'm on my own time, so I'm happy to stay. I'm curious.
you enjoying
Thank
all
you.
So, Greg, should we go on to your Public Works Director's report?
Sure, I mean, I'll keep it brief. The only thing I really have to report is we did get, was it 4 applicants? There's 4 applicants for the mechanic position. So they'll be going through a testing and interview process, so hopefully we'll have a good candidate out of that pool and get somebody the next month or so. And as Harry said, our lab technician is retiring after 26 years here, yes. So we have that currently advertised. It closes next week, so let's see if we get some folks in for that.
One thing that jumped out at me here.
Wait,
Oh,
that's the
Okay.
facility report, right, Dave?
Yes.
well, it's
Okay.
Yeah, because I don't
It's
have
a-
any reports, he's looking
it's
at-
a monthly report, whatever that is, okay.
Okay,
I'm all set.
okay, thank you. Harry, you want to just summarize any key points of the facility report?
Effluent nitrogen, 147 pounds per day, so that was below our limit. So we finished the year well below our limit, so we will be collecting credits from DEP this year instead of paying for them.
Yeah.
We had a sewer force main break at the Deerfield Pump Station on December 23rd. It got repaired on the 28th. In the interim, about 8,000 or 9,000 gallons of sewage seeped out.
Yeah. For force mains to break, that happens fairly often, doesn't it?
Well, not often. It's the first one we've had since I've been here,
Really, huh?
for 6 years.
Anyway, things get old and,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, things settle
yeah,
and crack. And
yeah, okay. One thing that jumped out at me here is that we have all these performance limits and so forth, and we're in Fat City for most of them. We're 85% limit. We removed 97%.
Right.
85, we reduced 98. But the enterococci, which I never recall hearing about that before, the result is 77. And the permit limit is 35. So we're in big, are we in?
So that it's a strange setup. We're allowed to exceed a certain amount. There's like 3 different calculations. The 35 or less is kind of a misnomer. It's not a failure that we had that one errand.
I'm sorry, you said,
It's not a violation that we had that one errant test. Because it's like the tests within a certain number of tests.
oh, so this is an anomaly. There's just one.
It is, and it doesn't create a violation.
Have you any idea why? Where did we have a flood event?
Can't recall what caused that. It might have been a high flow event, maybe pushing through the plant. I'm not positive on that. I could look into that. Let me look into that a little further and I can answer
Okay,
that.
yeah, it'd be interesting to know, because that's a you know, two and more than twice.
Yeah,
It's just, what are enterococci anyway? That's
I'm looking at November's report and it was 7.4, so it was really a lot lower. It does seem to be an anomaly.
Maybe make sure that it's both an anomaly and not a decimal point error.
yeah, I'm wondering.
yeah.
Supposed to occur. Okay, so let's go on to the I guess the only thing in terms of my report, there was this email about the Representative Advisory Board of the Southeastern Connecticut Water Authority. This is the meeting. I attended some Zoom meeting a few months ago. I can't remember if this is that same.
You attended the committee of the chairs meeting.
Oh, that's right. That's what that was.
That's,
Okay, so I haven't seen this before. So is this something I need to attend? Would be useful for me to attend?
so, I don't think that's the South, was it the regional water that covers Ledger, Monville? Oh, yeah, we're not in that. They used to have Bel Air, but Groton Utilities bought them out.
So, I can't remember our town clerk's name.
Let's see, McCusher.
Yeah, so she sent this email.
I think she might have sent it by mistake
Mistake.
because
Okay.
part of this, because I did do a little bit of internet
Okay,
research
thank you.
and it looks like part of the city of Groton is in that thing,
I see.
but none of our territory. And it's only for fresh water, for drinking water. It doesn't look like it's actually for wastewater.
Okay, okay, so I can just ignore that whole thing.
My guess, yes, because
Okay,
it
Thank
looks like
you.
they focus more on drinking water than.
okay. Okay, so then we're on to the update on Beard and Mystic Cheese and ARPA funding and.
Yep, so just to update everybody on the ARPA funding process, I went through the long-term recovery committee. And they're the ones that came up with the ratings and, as you said, Mystic Cheese was in top 20 and Beard was, I think, 24, 25, something like that, but it's now onto the town council and the council started going through it. They're looking at it and I think they're kind of taking everything, throwing them all back in the hopper and going through them all again, because they sent out requests. They had a bunch of questions. So each applicant got a 2-page questionnaire to fill out some more details about their application. They sent all that stuff back about a week ago and they're meeting. They have a special committee of the whole meeting a week from tonight, which is the 17th, just to discuss ARPA funding projects. And I hope they're going to rank them and figure it out, but I wouldn't bet on it.
Wouldn't it have been possible for the cheese company and the beer people to submit a joint application? I mean,
We've told the council, the town managers told the council, you've got to consider these as one, even though there's separate applications. And I think most of the councils think understand that. And are going to consider them as one application versus two.
I mean, it just seems strange to me that one is in the top 20 and one isn't, when it's really
It's the
sort of
same thing. It's exactly the same thing, yes. And I don't know how they ranked them on number scale. Some people you could tell that it must have been a group of like 10 or 12 people, because some projects got very high scores and some things very low. And you could tell who, they were
favoring certain types of projects and stuff, so. But we'll see what the council does. Hoping that by, after next week, that we'll have some answers to where this is gonna be going for them.
Okay, so I guess one question I have, we have the proposal in around Gravel Street,
Yeah, it's still in there.
right? So, but given how things are just dragging on, I guess what I'm wondering is, do we need to just go ahead and do whatever we do? I understand the problem is a 5-year limit is come up or coming up or whatever. Do we need to do something to just go ahead and put that back in with our own money? I mean, if we get the ARPA money, great, but
Yeah, no, my plan is if we don't get that, and I was hoping by now we know, but it's dragging out much
it
too long.
wouldn't surprise me if it kept going for another
Yeah.
few months.
And if it does, I'm gonna go to the council and the RTM and then reallocate some undesignated funds that we have in our capital back to the gravel street. And I have to go to the council and the RTM to do that, but it takes us a couple months, but that's what we'll do.
And it just seems like we should get that going again.
Yeah.
Hopefully, a lot of the supply chain issues that were also impacting work are less
We should be,
problematic now. And
yeah.
so I just don't want to wait around. They could take another 6 months to
Yeah, no, I'm not
decide
gonna.
about ARPA funding.
My plan wasn't to wait.
We had the money to do the work, so seems like we should just get back to doing it. Okay.
But other than the ARPA application process, I have not heard anything. I don't know if you have, Harry, from Beard or Mystic Cheese, on their side streaming efforts, or I'm assuming they're still continuing with them. And we haven't done any more sampling out there.
No. So I was gonna suggest that we do another sampling. So it seemed like that wasn't a huge inconvenience and difficulty for y'all, but I guess I'm thinking that again, because of the calculations that I did, it had, clearly a very dramatic impact on, I mean, it doesn't make their bill go away, but I'd like to know they aren't way back up again or something. And if by chance they were to be similar or even lower, well, at least that gives us some notion of that wasn't a one-time fluke, those measurements. And I guess at some point, and maybe this is one of the things we raised to the town attorney, but at some point we need to just start billing them. But
Well, we gave them what, 90 days after
the ARPA is.
denial or approval or whatever.
After the ARPA thing.
That's right, so. I guess, yeah, that's right, thank you. I forgot we had that, yes. Okay. Anything else on that? I think a new business, there's the FY 24 budget. I assume y'all are just starting on that, or?
Well, we're pretty much, we have to get it to the town manager this week, so I do have,
You're pretty far along.
we're pretty far along. Yeah, I do have some draft copies, just hand out here. Send it to Laura, I guess.
Mhm.
Sorry, Laura, we're gonna look at draft copies of the budget without you.
Yeah, I just.
Yeah.
We can go over this in more detail next time. I just want to give you a heads up as what we're submitting, because it's a long process, as you know, we got to go. And you look at it, we go through it gets through the town manager. Meet with him, he goes through it, then it gets printed, goes onto the council, then the RTM. Public Works Committee, then the RTM itself. But some of the highlights, if you look over on the far right, it kind of shows the changes from last year. The top group there. Sorry, let me give you.
I have it in my brain. We're good.
Brain, yes, is the personnel. That's up about 4%, $92,000 or so. This is, all the health insurances, the pay and overtime and all that stuff. So that's pretty typical. The big ones that kind of jump out at us are, if you get down to professional technical services, about halfway down the operations there, it's up $116,000, and that's primarily due to the sludge. The price of sludge hauling is going up, as well as the amount of sludge we're hauling. So Harry feels that, we need to increase the budget quite a bit there. It's about $100,000. Next one below that is materials and supplies. You see it's about 92,000, and the reason for that big increase is pretty much the chemicals, the chlorine and the caustics that we use at the plant. The price of that is really skyrocketed. Down third from the bottom, we got vehicles. There's we haven't, most of you guys have bought a vehicle in a while. So there's 4 vehicles that they're looking to purchase to replace some about 15-year-old small pickups, a utility truck that needs to be replaced, and a couple of one for the your vehicle, I think it's pretty old, the Escapes. So that's what the 172 is for. And then the last item there, the reserve fund equipment, this is the CIPs. This is up a little bit from last year. I brought my list with me. What we're looking at for CIPs, we'll start with the treatment facility. When we redid the effluent pump station, we put in 2 very large pumps and 1 small, what we call a jockey pump, which takes the smaller flows. And that one actually ends up running, would you say 60% of the time? And there's only 1 of those. So, and they're much more, obviously smaller, so it's much more efficient to run that versus the big, huge ones, which accounts for when we get the big flows. So when we did the project, we didn't have the funds to get a second jockey pump. So we're looking to purchase that now. And that's what is $350,000 for that. And, to get that in there so that we can alternate the pumps to extend the life of them. And if the jockey pump goes down, we're using the big pumps for no reason. So that's what that's for. And we're also got some money in there to do engineering and design work to convert our chlorine sterilization method to UV light. This kind of gets in with the cost of the chemicals and everything, and also just the worker safety of being around chlorine, and also what it's doing to all the pumps and stuff. Harry says we're going to be replaced. I mean, I'll let you talk about it a little bit more. You know more about it than I do.
The chlorine is pretty destructive. The plastic tanks we have are 2 28,000-gallon tanks. They're at the end of their life, need replacement. It's difficult anyway to pump the chlorine. It gases off really easy, and the pumps lose their prime, which causes call-ins at night and that sort of thing. So it's kind of a problematic system. And with the UV, pretty much hands off. I've worked with it at Bristol. We had UV, and there's no consumables to it other than the power. The other expenses with the chlorine are the testing. We're constantly testing. We have 4 tests a day to do that. Constantly monitoring it because it's computer controlled. So we have analyzers, 4 analyzers that control the report to the computer. So all these things have reagents in them. It's I haven't sat down and pulled all the costs together, but there's a lot of costs to run the chlorine system.
Over the long run, people have.
That's what I'm I'm hoping, we got just a quick sort of study on it and, it would be, I don't want to say an easy retrofit, but I mean, the configuration we have now with the chlorine tanks, it's, they can just retrofit right into those tanks. So it's, not a lot of infrastructure
The
conversion.
why change from chlorine to UV in the swimming pool. It's made a great difference.
Okay, anything else on the budget? I'm gonna ask my question on vehicles, which is are there options that need to be considered for either hybrid or all electric or?
Well, I guess they could, there's, I'm not sure what the, we were given the prices by Bob, I'm not sure what those included, whether they were hybrid or not.
No, we could certainly, I mean, the two escapes and the small pickup truck, which is, just for driving around town doing the call before you digs and stuff.
The town has a bank of recharging stations somewhere. I've seen it. I can't remember where.
We have a couple here.
Yeah. Are we having any electric vehicles?
We have, planning has one,
Pardon?
planning department has one, all electric. We have some hybrids.
Yeah. Any thought that that would be a good thing for the planet? And if so, are we doing anything?
Well, no, I think it is, probably is going to be the wave of the future. I think it's.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just thinking, you said that, you had 15-year-old vehicles. It seems like if we're thinking about a 15-year time frame forward,
Be a good time to-
it would be a good time to look into the, as long as it's not cost prohibitive or something
Yeah.
to,
Well, I think we need to look ahead on all that. I'm convinced electricity is going to get cheaper and cheaper if they do this fusion power business.
that's decades from now. Okay, so y'all, again, I think that's just my sentiment. It would be nice to, and you,
Yeah, keep it in mind.
Yeah, no, it certainly is something that, that I think the council, they're going towards more clean energy type vehicles and things to, heat bills and stuff. And we're looking at some of those systems now, getting away from the oil and the gas.
okay, so I do think if people can think about questions for the town attorney, I will try and do that. I somehow find it easier to think of them when I'm sitting here at the meeting than when I get home, but,
Yeah.
and, I guess we can email around about,
I'm gonna try to work on it. We've got a month so down with it.
okay, so somebody want to make a motion to adjourn? And the second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next month, Laura.
See you then.
You got a special computer just for the WCPV?
No. It just happens to fit inside here.
Oh, okay.
It's called an iPad. You should get one. So that
There's a bunch of